Hey everybody, welcome to another Mandalorian review video. I've heard a lot of rumors that this episode would make the fandom either really happy or really angry. Personally, I don't think it's going to do either. What we get in this episode is the Imperial Shadow Council, the possible return of the Imperial Super Commandos, Grogu using the corpse of his friend as a mech suit, Paz Visla dies, and Dinjarin is captured. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe and all that. Seriously though, I don't have any strong opinions about this episode. It definitely takes a while to get going. It does get better by the end, but I wouldn't say the whole episode is interesting. Rather, there are a few interesting moments that I think are going to be explained in an uninteresting way. What do I mean by that? Okay, so in the last episode, Bo-Katan found her old Mandalorian comrades in order to unite them with Din Djarin's tribe. They refuse at first, but then Din gives her the Darksaber, making her worthy to rule Mandalore. Technically, the way she quote-unquote earns the Darksaber does make sense according to the code, but it was a really lame and unsatisfying way to tie up the story of Bo-Katan trying to regain her honor, and I think that that's how some things are going to turn out in the finale. So going through the episode, it starts off with Moff Gideon meeting with the Shadow Council. Basically, the Imperial Remnant made up of various, maybe you call them warlords or something. And you have guys there of different ranks. You have obviously Moff Gideon, and a Moff, as far as I remember, is something akin to a kind of the governor of a sector. So he's fairly high ranking. You have Commandant Hux, who is in charge of Project Necromancer, which is either the project where Palpatine clones himself or where he creates clones of Snoke. He's also the father of General Hux from the sequel trilogy. You also have Captain Pellaeon, who is actually a liaison for Grand Admiral Thrawn. He's also from the Legends book Heir of the Empire, which is kind of what the Thrawn story is somewhat based off of. And so this is kind of the first real mention or confirmation that Thrawn is out there, and he has some sort of association with the Imperial Remnant, although according to Moff Gideon and the other members of the Shadow Council, they haven't seen Thrawn and they haven't heard any mention of Thrawn. It's really just Captain Pellaeon on his own who's kind of speaking on behalf of Thrawn and stating that, trying to keep his position a secret so that, his return is actually effective. What's also interesting in this scene is that Commandant Hux questions Moff Gideon about what happened to Dr. Pershing, which we know from one of the episodes of the season. His research was lost after he was captured by the New Republic, and then his mind was basically melted by Officer Kane, who is also a former Imperial who worked for Moff Gideon and is working for him still as a spy within the New Republic. But Moff Gideon denies working on clone research despite having had Pershing under his control. What that means is that Moff Gideon wasn't using Pershing and Grogu as a means to help the Emperor with his experiments. Rather, he was using Grogu's blood, his Force-sensitive blood, for his own gain, which I'll talk more about in a little bit. Moving on through the episode, there is a part where Greef Karga shows Din Djarin that basically he had IG-11 rebuilt as IG-12, except he has no memory circuits. He's not even really sentient. He's basically not autonomous. And so he had him built, though, so that Grogu could ride inside of him. It's basically played off for comedy throughout the episode, which is kind of weird considering the fact that Grogu is using the corpse of his former friend as a mech suit. But yeah, it's not super important. He doesn't do anything cool with it. But moving on to the main plot, Bo-Katan brings the true, I guess you call them true Mandalorians, to Navarro, where the Children of the Watch have their settlement. And uniting the two groups actually goes off fairly well in the beginning. A lot better than I thought it would. I mean, you have the quote-unquote true Mandalorians who, see value in lineage and in symbology like the Darksaber. And then you have the other side who are basically religious zealots who believe in kind of a pure, more ancient version of the Mandalorian creed. Tell me in the comment section which side you agree with. Would you side with the true Mandalorians or the Children of the Watch? It goes over fairly well, and Bo-Katan announces that she's going to retake Mandalore, but because of the potential dangers underneath the planet's crust, as well as the fact that they can't scan the planet through the atmosphere, they basically need to take a search party to go down to the planet before the whole fleet can arrive. A number of Mandalorians from each side volunteer. You, of course, have Dinjarin and Grogu. You have Axe Woves and Koska Reeves, who served under Bo-Katan. You have Paz Visla and a number of the Children of the Watch who join. And you also have the Armorer who joins, which is somewhat surprising. And so the whole fleet arrives in the orbit of Mandalore. Bo-Katan takes her search party, and there's definitely some sadness among the different Mandalorians over the state of their planet. Some of the true Mandalorians were actually there when the planet was bombed, and so they have that experience. And then the Children of the Watch look at it, and they have no idea what's going on because they were on the planet Concordia when the purge occurred. They start traveling to basically look for the main forge of Mandalore, which they will use as a home base. But while they're traveling, they actually come upon a ship carrying the last remaining remnant of native Mandalorians who apparently survived the purge and have been just hanging out on the planet all these years, barely scraping by, traveling along the surface of the planet, trying to survive. They immediately recognize Bo-Katan and re-pledge themselves to her service. They also promise to take her to the main forge because, they've kind of got the planet mapped out despite its current state. And while they're traveling, they tell Bo-Katan more about the purge and mentioned that because their people hadn't surrendered, the Empire basically used them as an example. Except that Bo-Katan explains that she did in fact surrender the planet. That Moff Gideon came to her with a proposal, that being that she surrendered the Darksaber, she disarmed the planet, and that her people get to live. Except, obviously, Moff Gideon betrayed her and bombed the absolute crap out of everybody. You can tell from some of the Mandalorians that this is a big shock. They're a warrior people. They don't surrender in battle. And so they see the Mandalorian princess, the person that they pledged their life to, and find out that she surrendered. She kind of tries to heal the wounds by pointing out the fact that the Mandalorian people have survived through everything and that no other culture has been able to defeat them, yet they continue to defeat themselves with infighting. This is demonstrated when one of the Mandalorian survivors asks about the Children of the Watch and where they were during the Purge. And the Armorer explains that they were on the planet Concordia, and when the guy asks her if they are Death Watch, she says no, Death Watch is no more, because the group basically splintered into different warring factions. Which is interesting because I've been wondering this whole time whether or not the Children of the Watch are in fact just Death Watch without the colors and without the name. And it is possible that the Armorer is just lying, but it also makes sense that, there are different factions out there. So who knows? There could possibly be a hardcore Death Watch faction out in the galaxy right now. But before they arrive to kind of the cavern entrance to the main forge, the Armorer tells Bo-Katan that she's going to take the wounded Mandalorians back to the fleet, which is interesting because I was surprised that she came on the journey at all, but then she seems to have taken the first opportunity to leave, which I think is fairly suspicious. There was also a scene with a big, kaiju monster, and it didn't really amount to much, but it does make me question why the Mandalorians aren't more aware of the different species that live on their planet. I mean, this thing was almost about the same size as the mythosaur. You'd think it'd be part of their warrior culture and another beast that they'd want to try to tame. And it doesn't seem like a creature that can travel through space, so I don't know how else it would have gotten there unless it's been there since ancient times. So the Mandalorians, minus the Armorer and some of the wounded survivors, go underground and they get to the main forge, and just like everywhere else on Mandalore, the forge is completely desolate. They don't really get to have a lot of time to try to search the area because what looks like the Imperial Super Commandos, which was a group of Mandalorians led by a guy named, I think, Gar Saxon, and he had basically pledged Mandalore to the Empire in return for becoming its new ruler. This took place during the reign of the Empire and the Rebellion era. Now, I'm not sure if these are Imperial Super Commandos because the armor definitely looks different, but it is confirmed that they're wearing Beskar. So it could just be these are like stormtroopers with jetpacks and Beskar armor. Though I think further proof that they probably aren't Mandalorians is the fact that they're taken out relatively easily. I mean, Bo-Katan's search party, they only lose like 1 or 2 guys compared to probably a couple dozen of these jetpack troopers who are taken out pretty easily. When Bo-Katan's party decides to follow the rest of the troopers, they find themselves in a hangar. It's an Imperial hangar. There's, TIE fighters. More Imperial troops arrive, as does a black-clad figure wearing Mandalorian armor and a helmet very reminiscent of the Death Watch helmets worn by those who served under Darth Maul. And this turns out to be none other than Moff Gideon. And he explains that basically the Empire has kind of set up base here, that they've mined the planet for its resources, which I'm guessing means Beskar, and that he's created a more powerful army, including a suit for himself. Now, this tells us a few things. Basically, he says that every culture has something to offer, to include the Mandalorians, the Jedi, and the cloners, which tells us that when he had Dr. Pershing experimenting on Grogu, he was trying to build himself this like ultimate army made of Force-sensitive Imperial troopers that wore Beskar armor. So, despite the fact that Thrawn is out there somewhere, and he has his liaison on the Shadow Council, Gideon is trying to kind of make his own place, put himself up as the head of the new Empire, or as we know, the First Order. But it's also interesting that he's wearing a Darth Maul helmet. At first I thought, why in the world would Moff Gideon wear a Darth Maul Death Watch helmet? It's possible that some of the armor that he and his troops are wearing is just repurposed Mandalorian armor. So maybe he just took a Death Watch helmet and kind of painted it slightly different to match the rest of his Imperial Beskar armor. But I think it's possible that given his kind of attitude towards Mandalorian culture, how he doesn't really care much for most of the customs, he just sees utility in certain aspects of the culture. He understands the purpose of the Darksaber in Mandalorian culture, which is why he took it from, or why he basically requested that as part of the bargain to free Mandalore during the Purge. And he even asks for it back from Bo-Katan. And so I think that Moff Gideon perhaps sees some type of kinship with Darth Maul, because keep in mind that towards the end of the Clone Wars, Darth Maul was kind of having his own private war against Emperor Palpatine. And where he had built himself a criminal empire, they kind of fell to the wayside. That plan failed. And so he went to Mandalore to build himself a new army. Well, when he got to Mandalore, Paz Visla had taken control temporarily, and recognizing the customs, Darth Maul defeated Paz Visla, which won him the Darksaber, which meant that he was now ruler of Mandalore, giving him the army he needed. But just like Moff Gideon, Darth Maul didn't really care about the Mandalorian culture outside of the parts that would make him more powerful. But he was an outsider. And so I think Moff Gideon is very much the same. He's an outsider who only uses the Mandalorian culture for utilitarian purposes. And so in that way, I think he sees himself as the future ruler of Mandalore in what will become maybe the center of the new empire. He's going to build himself like this Force-sensitive army wearing Beskar armor, and they're going to be stationed on Mandalore. Hopefully they kind of confirm why he's wearing a Darth Maul helmet. So anyways, because they ambushed the Mandalorian party, they do manage to capture Dinjarin, which was kind of weird. I know a lot of people have complained that Dinjarin has sort of taken a backseat to Bo-Katan in his own series, and I both agree and disagree with it. On the one hand, I don't think it's ever a smart move to sideline your main character in the series. I mean, the new version of He-Man I thought was a fairly good example of how badly that works out. But on the other hand, I don't really care for Dinjarin. I mean, he was cool in the first episode of The Mandalorian when he came out as kind of like a classic sort of spaghetti western type character. But it became obvious fairly quick that the writers put more emphasis on Grogu in terms of giving them a personality than they did with Dinjarin. And so I think the story of Bo-Katan is just more interesting. I'm more invested in her character, so I don't really mind too much that she's kind of taking the center stage. I do wish they would write her better because I think the writing for this season has been fairly lackluster all around. So yeah, that's kind of my opinion on that. Most of the party is able to escape because Paz Visla actually sacrifices himself, which is fairly disappointing because he was actually having some real character growth and he had finally started to, see some camaraderie with Dinjarin and Bo-Katan. It's possible that his character died because Jon Favreau was just tired of portraying the character and he just wanted to focus on directing and writing and whatnot. But thankfully, Paz Visla does go out like an absolute beast. He fires his minigun, defeating a whole slew of these jetpack troopers up to the point where his gun overheats, and then he takes him down with hand-to-hand combat, defeating every single one until 3 Praetorian guards show up. Now these guys are like the guards of the Emperor. They're the most elite warriors in the Empire. They use special vibroblades. They have Beskar armor. Part of their training is they have to fight and survive against Darth Vader. I mean, obviously these guys probably weren't trained by Vader, given the fact that this takes place at least 5 years after the Return of the Jedi. But let's just say these are the most elite warriors that the Empire has ever had. With the 3 of them, they managed to kill Paz Visla, which is kind of sad, but I'm glad that he got a fitting end for a true Mandalorian. And so that's pretty much where the episode ends. Bo-Katan's party seems to escape. Moff Gideon sends TIE fighters out to the Mandalorian fleet that's sitting out in orbit. So basically we have to wait till the finale to find out how that all works out. But before I end the video, I want to talk about the Armorer once again. For the past couple of videos that I've done, I've posited the theory that the Armorer is kind of masterminding a plot against Bo-Katan, possibly against Dinjarin, in order to purify the Mandalorian culture. And this episode did nothing to kind of quell my theories. In fact, it only strengthened them, in my opinion. Because think about the fact that the Armorer asked Bo-Katan to reunite the Mandalorians and retake Mandalore. And what a coincidence that when they arrive to Mandalore, Moff Gideon has an Imperial base set up and they're ready to ambush them. Now, when Moff Gideon had talked to Officer Kane at the beginning of the episode, she's currently working for the New Republic, and so she gained information about how the Mandalorians defeated the pirates on Navarro. This is information that surprised Moff Gideon. So you could argue, if the Armorer is a potential spy and she's working with Moff Gideon, then how would he have not known about the Mandalorians on Navarro? Well, one of my ideas about that is that it's possible that Moff Gideon and the Armorer have been working together for some time, but I think a kind of a kink in their plans occurred when Dinjarin showed up to the Armorer in the first episode and said, I am going to Mandalore to prove that it isn't poisonous. And then the second thing would be Bo-Katan arriving and joining the tribe. Because if you remember back at the end of Season 1, the Mandalorian covert on Navarro was pretty much wiped out by the Empire when Moff Gideon had arrived, except the Armorer was the last person living. Now, she said that she stayed in order to kind of collect as much Beskar as she could and take the forge with her. But how is it she survived in the first place? As we saw from the pile of armor, most of the Mandalorians had given up their armor and helmets, basically forsaken the way in order to survive. Of course, we know Paz Visla survived because he was the only one with the Armorer in the Book of Boba Fett. And she even states in that episode, when Dinjarin arrives, she says, "Now we are 3," which means that none of the other Mandalorians from the Children of the Watch had stayed. To me, it tells me 2 things. One, that kind of is another signal to her that not enough Mandalorians are following the way. And 2, I think that she was working with Moff Gideon, and that's how she survived that whole ordeal. But again, I don't think she was ever expecting someone like Bo-Katan, who didn't follow the way, to come and join the tribe. And I don't think she expected Dinjarin to actually go to Mandalore and bring back water from the mines. Why would she even accept those 2? I mean, Paz Visla told them both that they were apostates, and the armorer herself told Dinjarin that he was an apostate. But I think that, if she wants to continue this pure version of what she sees as Mandalorian culture, she needs followers. In order to keep her followers, she has to be consistent with the beliefs that she's teaching, which means that when she tells Din Djarin that he has to bathe in the living waters of Mandalore in order to become a Mandalorian again, and he comes back having done it, she can't just deny him even though he had already taken off his helmet. And with Bo-Katan, if you remember from the episode where Bo-Katan joined the tribe, the armorer was very quick to bring up the technicality that, Bo-Katan hadn't taken her helmet off after bathing in the living waters herself. Now, why would she have done that? Well, again, the armorer is trying to remain consistent with her teachings. And, Bo-Katan showed up having saved Din Djarin and Grogu, having bathed in the living waters, having not taken off her helmet, but also within the first couple days of her being in the tribe, she saved Paz Visla's son from that dragon creature, which is the very first time since the Mandalorians have gone to that planet that a children of theirs had been saved, because up to that point, they'd been losing children left and right from this creature, but they couldn't follow it because their jetpacks didn't have enough fuel. So Bo-Katan comes back, having seen a mythosaur, having saved Din Djarin, having bathed in the living waters, and having saved Paz Visla's child. So the armorer couldn't just deny Bo-Katan, even though she was an apostate before. Instead, I think what she did is she saw this as an opportunity to get rid of those who don't follow the way. Because in the episode where she convinces Bo-Katan to take her helmet off, pretty much outright tells Bo-Katan that not enough Mandalorians are currently following the way, that many of them have strayed. She also tells Bo-Katan that she should reunite their people and retake Mandalore because she is the leader of prophecy. Now, what she doesn't say is that she wants to basically call those Mandalorians who have strayed from the way. But obviously she wouldn't. She wants Bo-Katan to believe that she believes in her as the future leader of Mandalore, something that Bo-Katan has been trying to do anyways on her own for years now. And so I think she saw the re-emergence of Din Djarin and the joining of Bo-Katan to her tribe as an opportunity to gather all the known Mandalorians in the galaxy and kind of pick and choose which ones would get to stay. And I think this was further demonstrated because, she saw those Mandalorians that were willing to trust Bo-Katan's leadership when they volunteered for the search party. And who do those happen to be? Well, you had, Paz Visla, who was killed. You had Din Djarin, who was captured by Moff Gideon. Bo-Katan, who the armorer probably, if she was working with Moff Gideon, probably hoped that would have been killed by Moff Gideon. And then you have some other guys from both tribes that were there. But yeah, that's my theory. I think there are definitely holes in the theory, but I think not everything is what it seems. I mean, there was that one scene where it showed her flying back into orbit to take the wounded Mandalorians to the fleet, and it showed her hail the commander. Now, we didn't need to see that. I mean, it was pretty much implied she was going to take them to the fleet. The writers made sure to put that scene in the episode, so I think they wanted us to notice that. Just like I think they wanted us to notice all these little moments here and there where the armorer, it focuses in on her and she kind of gives like some type of look that obviously we can't see her face, but as much as a Mandalorian can express some type of emotion through their helmet, I think that's what they're trying to do. I don't know if the armorer and Moff Gideon are, true allies, or if they both believe that they're the mastermind of their own plan and are just using the other. But I definitely think something suspicious is going on with the armorer, and I think that'll be confirmed in the finale. But let me know what you guys think about this episode. Let me know who you think the spies are and how the season will end. If you guys enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell so you never miss out on a new video. Thanks for watching.